Special Office of Dr. Jim Taylor. A couple weeks ago we talked about confidence and where it comes from, how athletes can develop it, how you need to practice it. And he said, we could do a whole interview on imagery. So I thought, let's do a whole interview on imagery. Dr. Jim Taylor, welcome back to the Athletes Audio Academy.
Great to be back and always fun, Bob. I appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. So what did you mean when you said we could do a whole interview on that? Let's just keep it wide open and start there. What did you mean by that?
Well, imagery is the most powerful mental tool there is. I liken it to being weightlifting for the mind, because when you do imagery, you can develop every aspect of your mind. A lot of the areas that can be improved are motivation, confidence, intensity, focus, emotions. It can also help with technical skills and tactical skills, and rehearsing that. There's a ton of research on that. So imagery is just a phenomenally powerful tool that is vastly underused by athletes.
My own experience with imagery, and in fact the basis for Athletes Audio, comes back to that whole concept. But a lot of athletes, I think, struggle with the idea of visualizing themselves in first person, or even the whole idea of creating those images. It's my, I don't know, contention, and I didn't, get a PhD, so I don't know. But it's my contention that this is a skill we all had when we were little. When I played hockey on the frozen pond in Florissant, Missouri, we were playing for the Stanley Cup, as far as I knew. You know what I mean? So kids have the ability to imagine themselves in different settings than the one that they're actually in. Is there some translation between that skill and what we understand as imagery today for athletes?
To some degree. Basically, imagery is just a fantasy in your head, creating images and so on. In fact, I don't like to call imagery visualization, because visualization puts too much of an emphasis on the visual aspects of the imagery. And for me, the real power of imagery is, yes, being able to see it, but more importantly, to feel it, that kinesthetic sense, being able to generate, really to reproduce the total performance experience in your imagery. Now, imagery is a skill that does develop with practice. I've worked with athletes who initially could barely image, but with practice they become more skilled at it. Some people are just phenomenally good at creating vivid, clear, totally comprehensive, thorough, multisensory imagery experiences. So with some people it's very natural, other people it takes some work. Certainly the use of video. The use of video is a great tool, because what is video but visual imagery?
So for that athlete who says to themselves, I'm not great at it, I can't do it, when I close my eyes I can't see anything, what's a couple steps that athlete could try just to get started and develop some facility and practice, and then start to develop some confidence and ability at using imagery? Right.
First of all, if it does help to have some video of yourself. So if you're a tennis player, get somebody to shoot some video on your smartphone or whatever. Or seeing yourself, because it's hard to imagine yourself if you've never seen yourself perform. And then lie down, take a couple of deep breaths, get really comfortable, and then just think back. Don't try to think forward, but think back to maybe a training session or a competitive event that you were in, and try to reproduce it. Don't try to force it, but just see what you can do in creating the images, the feelings, the tactile experiences, and see what comes from that. And I found that if an athlete commits to doing imagery, let's say 3 times a week for about 10 minutes a day, within a month they start gaining more control over their imagery, and start getting more comfort with it, and actually start seeing better quality imagery. Little side note on that, Bob, that feedback I often get from young athletes especially is they'll imagine themselves performing and they'll mess up in their head. They'll make a mistake. And they'll do it repeatedly. I worked with a young point guard not long ago where he'd imagined himself dribbling the ball down the court, and the ball would stick to the ground. Wow. And so that too is a skill. It involves control of your imagery, and the more you practice it, the greater control you get.
What's the first thing that an athlete would choose to image if they have the choice of, say, the tactical skills, the relaxation skills, the confidence skills? What would you say would be the best first choice?
Well, I'm not sure there really is a best first choice, because it depends upon what areas you need work on. So if you have an athlete who tends to get really nervous for a competition, I'd have them imagine themselves pre-competitively going through their routine in their imagery, seeing themselves doing relaxation exercises, being positive, being confident. If an athlete was working on something new technically, there's a ton of research that shows that imagery can improve motor skills, even without actually practicing. And that when you combine the actual physical practice with imagined practice, you improve faster and better. So it's really, there's no priority so much as deciding for each individual athlete what specific area they need to work on most, and then focus on that area until they, in their imagery, they can do it really well. And then I found that the translation from quality imagined performance to quality actual performance, the translation comes pretty cleanly.
So I'm curious, I have this image as you said that because I'm a daily imagery practitioner myself. I do it myself every single day. And I have an image that pops into my mind of a young tennis player whose coach is telling him that the reason he's not winning is because of some technical skill of swinging the racket or serving the ball. But that athlete doesn't necessarily feel like that's the thing. They feel like maybe they're distracted or they have a hard time keeping their mind on the game or something along those lines. A, do you see that sort of misdiagnosis or that sort of behavior from coaches a lot? And B, I would assume in that scenario that the athlete should choose the one that they think is their struggle, not the one that coach says.
Right, right. Certainly a key point there is that the coach and the athlete need to get on the same page. Mm-hmm. Because if the athlete doesn't buy into what the coach is saying, then the athlete's not going to do the thing that the coach is saying. Uh-huh. But most importantly, yes, the athlete needs to go with what they feel is most central and focus on that area. But I think the main thing there in that case is they need to get on the same page.
So the longer we hang on, the longer we hang here on Skype, the more times you're going to say, "Hey, we could do a whole section on that." So let's wrap up our imagery with one or two sort of points to summarize what you're saying. If you had a megaphone to tell athletes about imagery, what's a couple things you'd want to leave them with?
Okay, imagery is a skill that needs practice just like anything else. If you imagine yourself doing anything, once every 2 weeks, you're not going to get anything out of it. Just like if you lifted weights once every 2 weeks, you wouldn't get stronger.
Yeah.
You need to commit to it 3 times a week for 10 minutes. Find a quiet place, lie down, do some relaxation, then create an imagery scenario. Start of yourself doing something technically or tactically or psychologically, performing. Start in your imagery in a very simple environment such as a practice situation where there are no distractions, no pressures. See yourself working and feeling yourself working on that thing that is your imagery goal. When you're able to do that consistently for maybe 3 or 4 sessions where you feel really good and the image is really good and successful, then move to a little more competitive, a little more complex situation. Maybe a practice match or a practice competition. See yourself doing that again, achieving that imagery goal in that situation. And you work yourself up what I call the imagery ladder until in your imagery you're seeing yourself achieve that imagery goal in the most important competition of your life. And the idea then is if you can see yourself performing incredibly well in that hugely important competition, when you get to that competition, you've actually performed and succeeded in that situation dozens upon dozens of times. Mm-hmm. So all of a sudden, it's not that big a competition. It's just another competition that I've been successful at.
Right,
right. So to wrap it all up, bottom line is create an imagery program, set some goals, set aside the time, and work on it.
So we've covered confidence and imagery, and I could listen to this guy talk all day. Dr. Jim Taylor has a bevy of platforms in which he disseminates information to help athletes and business people and other people interested in performance at improving their game, their life, their skills. So give us the list. Where can we get more information about you and find you online to get some more of those resources on other topics?
Sure. My website is incredibly content-rich and free. And you can go to my website. It's drjimtaylor.com, Dr. Jim Taylor. You can also find me on Facebook, on Twitter. If you do a search for my YouTube channel, I've got video newsletters there. The imagery that I've talked about, I've got articles on my website about that. So bottom line is if you just do any kind of search with Dr. Jim Taylor, the chances are one of those things is going to come up. And certainly from my website, you can get to any of the other social media formats.
We appreciate your generosity for all of that information, all the stuff you shared with us, and your time. Dr. Jim Taylor, everybody from the Athletes Audio Academy, glad to have you. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Bob. Appreciate it.